Hello, you're on Pablo Spot. I'm George. Welcome to a new episode on this series on refactoring Terraform modules. And today, I will be making changes to my ECS Terraform module to allow for infrastructure to be set up using ECS Fargate. And so if this series and the content of this channel lines up with your interest, hit the subscribe button and join me in this journey of learning by doing. So, let's start coding. On this episode where I configured a WordPress application with ECS, I have set up EC2 instances to run my containers. This means I'm still managing the virtual machines that I spin up to run my web application. ECS Fargate, which is an AWS service, allows for AWS to manage the instances used to run containers for you. This repository that I have opened on my VS Code is my Terraform module for ECS. And so, as usual, let me head to my VS Code terminal and prep for the work. So I'm going to run git pull. And then I'm going to create a branch for today's changes. And now let me head back to my VS Code Explorer to start the work. The first thing that I will do to achieve the setup for ECS Fargate is to head to my variables.tf. And in here, I will define a new variable called launch type. I will set the type of this variable to an object that contains three properties: type, CPU, and memory. I'm also going to set a default value for this variable. What this means is that my ECS module will run using EC2 by default. And now I'm going to head to my main.tf and start consuming this variable. The first thing I will do is update the launch type property in my ECS service and change that to pull the type from my new variable. And because I'm running using my default VPC, I need to ensure that public IP address assignment is enabled on my ECS service to allow for API calls within and outside of AWS to occur. And so on the network configuration block, I will set the property assign public IP to true. The other resource that I need to update is the task definition resource. I will first need to update the requires compatibilities property to source the value from my new variable. And then I will add two new properties on this resource, the CPU and memory, with the values coming from the same variable. The final set of changes that I need to implement is on the policies or permissions that I want my ECS task to perform. So if I scroll down to the IAM role resource, I will need to update the action block on this resource to allow access to Secrets Manager as well as KMS. And now that that's done, let me go ahead and commit my changes. So let me switch to my VS Code terminal. And now let me head to my browser and then access my GitHub account and then open the appropriate repository and then create a pull request and then squash and merge my change. And now let me switch to the code tab and then head to releases and then all the way to the right of this page, click draft a new release. And now I need to make adjustments to my working with ECS project to switch from EC2 to Fargate. I have loaded my working with ECS project on this current VS Code session that I have open. And before I do anything, I'm going to take a snapshot of the costing of the ECS using an EC2 setup. And then after making the necessary switch to ECS Fargate, I'm going to compare the cost on both setup and see the difference. So let me head to my VS Code terminal. I will prepare this session for running Terraform commands for a start. And now that I have my session ready, I will run the infracost command on the root of my repository and store the output to a JSON file. Now that I have a baseline cost file, let me go ahead and make my changes. So let me switch to my VS Code Explorer. I need to make my changes inside the ECS directory, so let's head to that directory and then open the Terraform configuration file. The first thing I will do is update my source to point to the new release that I've created. And then I'm going to head down to the inputs block. I will add a new input variable called launch type and set these properties specific to Fargate. When I use the launch type Fargate, I need to specify the CPU and memory size of the instance that AWS will launch for me. And for this exercise, I will set CPU to 256 and memory to 512. And because I need my container definition to align with this allocation, I need to update the CPU on my WordPress container definition. And because I'm now going to allow AWS to manage my instances, I no longer need to set up auto-scaling group resources for my infrastructure. So what I will do is open my ASG directory and then open the Terraform configuration file. And at the top of this file, I will add a new property called skip and set the value to true. So what this property will do is it will tell Terraform not to run against the modules defined or referenced inside this Terraform configuration file. And with that all set, let me stand up my infrastructure. So let me head to my VS Code terminal. And because this session is already prepared for running Terraform commands, I can just simply run Terraform run all apply. My Terraform apply is complete. So now let me switch to my browser and verify my application. And that worked. So what I'm going to do now is switch back to my VS Code. And I'm going to run infracost diff to see if there is any difference between the cost of setting up ECS using EC2 and Fargate. The infrastructure diff is complete. So let's have a look at the result of this comparison. Because I excluded the auto-scaling group module, the cost estimate result shows a savings of $17 per month for my auto-scaling group. And surprisingly, after switching to Fargate, the cost estimate shows that I will incur $21 of cost per month, which is about $4 increase from an EC2 instance setup. And I have a few theories why this is so. The instance that I have used to set up my auto-scaling group is very cost-effective, which allows me to take the entire power of an EC2 instance. If we compare this against the smallest possible combination that I can allocate to an ECS Fargate task, given that AWS is charging a standard rate per unit of capacity in CPU and memory, I may be better off using ECS with EC2. However, as your requirement change, like for instance, you require high CPU or high memory capacity for your containers, you may find yourself being better off with ECS Fargate than an ECS on EC2, not to mention the hassle of identifying the right EC2 instance type that you can use for your ECS infrastructure. With ECS Fargate, all you worry about is how much memory and CPU you need to allocate for your containers. You don't have to worry about maintaining the EC2 instances, like ensuring that they are hardened and patched when you have your ECS infrastructure running using Fargate. And that's all I have for today. Stay tuned as I continue to explore ways of refactoring infrastructure code in Terraform. In the meantime, please let me know what you think in the comments below and send me some likes if you find this useful. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you like the content on this channel. Until next time, see ya.